More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back. We're rolling along on a Thursday from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios, and time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios is 5:16. This is the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, 920 AM, Bucks, Burlington, Mercer Counties, or worldwide on the web at 920thejersey.com. Vinnie Iyer from the Sporting News wrote an article ranking all the NFL general managers. Giants fans, listen up. Jerry Reese was ranked at number 14. Mike McCagnon, the general manager of the Jets, was ranked at 19. And Eagles fans, you may not like this one, Howie Roseman was ranked at number 32. According to Vinnie Iyer, Howie Roseman, the worst general manager in the National Football League. And Vinnie is kind enough to join us right now. Vinnie, thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on, and we appreciate you coming on today. So why'd you rank Howie Roseman last? What'd you see to put him at number 32?
Well, when I look at his offseason, there's been some praise for it, but a lot of it has been kind of fixing everything that happened when he lost control technically to Chip Kelly, with some people there in between as well. But he was fixing what had been wrong mostly. And then I think the quarterback situation just stands out to me so much that you can't invest so much in terms of money and then come back and do the draft picks and get Carson Wentz and then spend a good amount of money on a backup and Chase Daniel and expect to come out with the best grade in the offseason or close to it. So when you look at it, there's a lot of positive things, but I think the quarterback situation, the way they've handled it, that they're still committed to Bradford, yet drafted Wentz with that high pick. I just don't like the way that sets up for problems down the line.
I'll preface my next statement by saying this. I did not want to see Howie Roseman back in the general managing position. I thought they should have went in a new direction after the whole Chip Kelly debacle happened, and that was some awful football that we saw the last year. I would not have brought him back. But with that being said, and I'm the farthest thing from a Howie Roseman apologist, I think he's done a good job this offseason. And one move that he did make was getting rid of Byron Maxwell, Kiko Alonso, and the 13th overall pick in the draft, moving up to number 8, where they eventually ended up getting Carson Wentz through that trade. So with that being said, the deal that he completely fleeced to get that 8th overall pick was the Miami Dolphins, and Mike Tannenbaum is at number 31 on your list. So since Howie, in my opinion, won that trade, shouldn't Howie be in front of Mike Tannenbaum based off that logic?
Yeah, it's pretty close. Let's just say that there's not much separation between those two guys, but I just look at it, again, I just put so much in quarterback, and with Tannenbaum, I think just being able to make a positive coaching change with him around and kind of not fully overseeing that, but being part of that, I think that comes into play a little bit. I think some of the things they did with the draft picks the past couple of years are better than people think. But like I said, there's not too much separation from what they did, because I think these are two teams that are still trying to find their way. It seems like when they've turned the corner, they take a lot of steps back, trying to go back to what worked at some point, and it's just confusing on the direction of those two teams.
Separating some other things on your list, Howie Roseman, he's not a new general manager, but he's in a new position this year because last year he wasn't the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. You also have some new general managers in the National Football League in Tennessee, Detroit, and then Cleveland as well. How did you decipher to rank those general managers, the ones that are in new spots compared to where Howie is?
Well, there was some feedback from people around the league on this, and I think what you get with John Robinson and Bob Quinn is a lot of respect for the Patriots organization. You've seen it trickle down to a lot of teams that have hired from that organization all over the place, and I think it's just a team that knows how to scout and find the deep talent that's not always there. And I think Robinson's already a big upgrade over Rustin Webster, who kind of had Marcus Mariota fall in his lap, but really hasn't done anything there to get Tennessee on track. So you look at that, and I think with Sashi Brown and the Browns, with the Paul DePodesta as well, kind of the co-guy there, I think they had to clean up, get rid of the bad elements, really change the way they spend, and that's the main thing they had to do. And you look at the players, that wasn't as big of a job right now for Cleveland. It was just cleaning out what was there and getting them to a point where they have the right direction. I think you have a little bit more clarity with that with Hugh Jackson and the Browns.
Did you like what the Browns did in the draft? Because they drafted wide receiver after wide receiver. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think they had to do that. I mean, they recognized that they don't really have any playmakers. They had to get them if they're going to do anything with their quarterback. This right now being Robert Griffin III, it looks like. So they had to do that, and they had to stockpile picks, which they also did across their defensive line and front seven. So there are a lot of things they need to do. They just need to get younger, and it hasn't worked with the guys that they brought in and spent on free agency. So they had to do a 180 there. I know there were some complaints about that, but the teams that do well don't do the spending the Browns and Bucks and teams like that have done, and too much failure.
Getting back to the Eagles as we're talking to Vinnie Iyer from the Sporting News, ranked all the general managers, had Howie Roseman at number 32. So there's only one way Howie Roseman can move on your list, and that's up. Although you have him right now at 32, do you at least have the confidence in him that the Eagles are going to be moving in the right direction in what is especially a weak NFC East?
Well, you have to see it play out, because right now I think you look at the Redskins, they're trending a little upward, especially with their defense now to back up some explosiveness on offense. The Giants made a lot of big moves, and that's reflected in Jerry Reese's kind of bump back up the charts. And I think the Cowboys are going to be a lot healthier to kind of be more like the team they were a couple of years ago. So I think it's going to be a tough division to win. I think it's going to be a critical decision. If Bradford, you have him in there and you've spent that money and you kind of crash and burns, and your plan to sit Wentz is gone, I think it's going to be a head scratcher there. I think if they, in retrospect, if they had just gone with Daniel and Wentz in some form, I know they didn't know about Wentz when they did Bradford. I think that it would have changed a little bit, but let's see how this plays out. And maybe these quarterbacks will all work out where they have the stopgap and the big franchise starter of the future.
And I know you don't make a move based off the fans, but you know these Philadelphia fans, they're very passionate. They're going to want to see a Lombardi trophy coming to Philadelphia one day. They've been waiting so long. You know they're going to be calling for Wentz after every Bradford interception this year. You know that, Vinny, right?
Yeah, I know that. And I'm not so sure that they're wrong about it. I think in today's age of quarterbacks, and everyone wants to sit and groom and say we can have this Aaron Rodgers-like situation, but you can only do that when you have Brett Favre, an all-timer and a Hall of Famer, to be in 2016. You're not going to do that necessarily if your stopgap is mediocre. You want to see what these kids can do. The more things they can do, and even the mistakes they make as a rookie, I think that just makes them better down the line, have more things to study and correct.
And these fans, they aren't stupid, and I think they're going to remember a lot what Sam Bradford did in this offseason when they were getting Carson Wentz, and you heard him say, I don't really want to compete, and you had all that stuff through his agent, Tom Condon, and they were trying to look for a trade, but in reality, they couldn't find a deal to get Sam Bradford because he's not that good, and he's taken a lot of money from a lot of teams, and all he's really been has been an injured player that throws a lot of interceptions.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is I don't like any team that says we're locked into so-and-so plan, or we're going with this guy to start, we're going with this guy to sit. I like to open it up. And you saw a couple of years ago in Seattle, they opened it up and see what happened with their situation with Russell Wilson. The teams that just say everyone's competing, everyone go out there, everyone's on equal ground, I think that's the way to go. I mean, if it were me, I would say Daniel, Bradford, and Wentz, go out there, prove yourself, create that competition, get your best out there instead of handing to a guy that wasn't very good last year and has had durability issues and has kind of complained about needing to compete about that status.
And I'm fine with not throwing Wentz in there right away, but I do agree with you to this aspect of, it's training camp. It hasn't even started yet. Let's have some competition. In the back of your mind, you may know what you want to do, but I want to see some competition as we're talking to Vinnie Iyer. So let's continue to look at your list. Number 14, Jerry Reese. That's an interesting one to me because Jerry Reese has won 2 Super Bowls, as you know, Vinny, but the last 4 years, he hasn't made the playoffs.
Yeah, that was a tough one as well because we did factor in body of work a little bit for a lot of these guys, and maybe a little bit more than halfway. So when you look at Jerry Reese, I think he has a good track record, and I particularly liked this offseason. I mean, you look at everything they've made, this should be a playoff team this year. I mean, you have Eli Manning for a few more years playing his best right now in Ben McAdoo's offense. You've got the defense kind of fixed on every level, getting Damon Harrison, Olivier Vernon, and getting Jenkins for your cornerback position. So when you look at that, they don't have too many holes, and they can do things that they weren't able to do, just hold up defensively. That's all they have to do. And then you look at that Sterling Shepard pick. I think that's going to be fantastic. And you have Paul Perkins, who I would watch for, too, having an impact more than the people might think this year.
They got rid of Tom Coughlin, and I like to see those pairs for a GM and a head coach. You need good synergy there, and if things don't work out with Jerry Reese in the next year or two, it could start something that isn't good, where you have a GM in here who picked his head coach, and then you have another head coach in Ben McAdoo who's still waiting there if they were to get rid of a Jerry Reese, and then that general manager may get stuck with him, so it could create something that I don't like to see. But do you believe the Giants should have kept Jerry Reese when they found out that Tom Coughlin wasn't coming back?
Well, I think the key, when you look at handing the reins over to Ben McAdoo, they wanted some form of stability and familiarity to that organization. This has been one of the more stable organizations all the way up to the top for a long time with what they've done. And I think they don't like too much tumult, especially when you get a team that's really in this era has won the 2 Super Bowls. I know it's been 4 years removed from the playoffs, but in the Eli era, it's worked out. So I think you want to keep that continuity, and I think they trusted him. And he said, hey, it's about time to address that defensive line, get that to that elite level that won us a couple Super Bowls. And I think that's why they stuck with Reese, because they know he has the formula at some point.
All right, fair enough. Let's get to the Jets. Maccagnan on your list was 19, and I've been impressed with Mike during his short time as the general manager of the Jets. What has impressed you about Mike, and what do you think he needs to still improve on?
Yeah, I think I liked the move last year for Brandon Marshall. I think this year, Kyrie Robinson and Matt Forte, I think they're pretty good at finding the second wave type veterans, and that's pretty big. A lot of teams do that. I think the Panthers do that better than anyone with those type of players that may be washed up but still give a team in a certain system a lot of value. So I think that's one thing he's done pretty well. I think the quarterback situation was a little messy, and we kind of also ranked this before we knew what was going to happen with Muhammad Wilkerson. So that came into play as well. But I just wish they'd just say, Ryan Fitzpatrick, we really want him back, and go in for him, or just say we're moving on with Geno Smith, and that's it. I think that has been kind of frustrating, or I think he would have had a little bit of a higher grade.
And that quarterback position, and they know each other clearly. Brandon Marshall has a great relationship with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He wants him back. Eric Decker wants Ryan Fitzpatrick back. But there's only so much training camp that you can miss where you say, okay, eventually we do have to make that decision, because if it's Geno Smith is the guy, I don't feel a whole lot confident, and I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a Hall of Fame quarterback by any means. But eventually, you're right, they need to set a date where, Fitz, you need to sign this contract, or we're going to move in the other direction.
Yeah, I think one thing that kind of gets lost is a couple things, is that Geno was kind of going to be the starter until fate, and I guess Ike and Kampali intervened there a little bit and kind of derailed that. I mean, he was on track to start, and what he showed a little bit on the field is pretty decent. So that it wasn't all lost. I mean, there was a lot of praise for Brandon Marshall for him last offseason. So I think when you have that situation where you're teetering and say, okay, we'll go Geno, but we're not going to close the door on Fitzpatrick, it just kind of shakes a guy in further that Geno, quite frankly, has had so many confidence issues plague him in New York, and I think looking over his shoulder to a guy that's not even back on the roster yet can be very troubling.
By the way, when you were making this list, who do you think is the most overrated general manager in the National Football League?
Well, I think that's a tough one, but I think two guys that fell that I kind of put them in place, and I think a lot of people have them a little higher. I think Mickey Loomis, to me, he's done a lot to establish what the Saints are, but they've kind of stagnated a little bit. They had a little bit better offseason this year, but this is a team that 10 years ago was excellent and they turned things around. But I think of late the Saints haven't done very well with defensive talent in particular. So that's one general manager to look at. I think Ryan Grigson and Trent Baalke, they've been up and down. They've been among the best, but right now I think they've just been in a little bit of a funk with all the decisions and coach relationships they've had of late.
What about Les Snead?
That's a guy that you look at, and I think you can probably lump Jeff Fisher into this mix as well.
Exactly.
They're overrated because everyone says this is a sleeper team every single year. They say this defense is dominant, which has a lot of pieces. Maybe the best defensive lineman outside of J.J. Watt and Aaron Donald. You have a lot of good pieces there. You have now an elite running back. but they still haven't figured out quarterback. And maybe Jared Goff is the answer and kind of changes that thinking. But you got to see some results. I know they have a lot of talent, but Snead and Fisher got to produce, and you think the pressure has to be on with L.A. and the big move there.
When we talk about sleepers, by the way, it's my understanding you're a big fantasy football guy. I know a lot of people listening are getting ready for their drafts, and they have their magazines and all their online rankings. Who were some sleepers this year for the fantasy football drafts?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but I'll give you one that I kind of really like this year, Jameis Winston. I think he's going to have a very good year. I just like Dirk Cutter, keeping the continuity there. I think there are a lot of things he did. You've seen him in a lot better shape. I think he's underrated still as a runner, and he's a guy that I think is going to run a lot more than people think. So I would keep an eye on him at quarterback. I think I mentioned Sterling Shepard among the rookies. I really like what he can do there in that offense. And Carlos Hyde, if there's going to be someone that stands out for Chip Kelly, I think this is the guy. I'm a little worried about the injuries, but he's a guy that if he's going to be healthy and on the field, he's going to have a lot of touches in that offense.
The one thing I can't stand, though, with fantasy football, and I play it. I play it with all my buddies and everything, but when I watch football, I want to see my team win in the worst possible way, and I see people, when they get involved with fantasy, their team can let up a touchdown, but as long as someone on their fantasy team scored that touchdown, people are okay with it. For example, I'm a Patriot fan, and when I used to draft Peyton Manning, when the Patriots played either the Colts or the Broncos, I wanted to see Manning throw a lot of interceptions. But as I bring up the Patriots, Tom Brady, I was able to get him late last year because people didn't know of the suspension, the ruling at the time. But now with Tom Brady, you know he is going to be sitting out the first 4 games of the season. What's Brady's draft stock in fantasy football? What round do you see him going in?
Yeah, I mean, this one is interesting because there's so many guys that can put up 30 touchdowns this year. There's just such a wealth of players, and I think what I kind of look at is he going to help you win a championship later? He probably will. So I think you have to look. I think you wait until like 5 or 6 guys are off just because that position is so deep. So I think maybe 6th round, 7th round, if he's just lingering around and people are just avoiding him, you got to jump on him. But keep in mind, he is a little older, so I think with so many rising talents at that position and the numbers can be available, yes, they're everywhere. I think you get kind of a sleeper later and maybe wait to get Brady as your first quarterback.
Hey, Vinnie Iyer, before we let you run, and you were great today on the Zach Gelb Show, and you could follow Vinnie on Twitter at Vinnie Iyer. What was the best reaction, the most hateful tweet that you got from an Eagles fan when you ranked Howie Roseman at 32?
Actually, surprisingly, they were very polite about it. Maybe they agreed with me more than I thought, but I think the thing was Howie did a great job, and that's about it. So a lot of people standing up for Howie, but nothing too bad. So Eagles fans, I was born in Pennsylvania a long time ago, so I kind of respect their feelings about their team. I love the passion.
Well, Vinnie, we appreciate the time today. Let's get a conversation closer to football season. Thanks so much, my friend.
All right, thank you.